Welcome to another episode of Dr. Simone Says. My name is Simone Eastman Yuan. I am a medical doctor with sickle cell disorder. I am also the best-selling author of the books All Rise, The Sickle Cell Community versus the Medical Establishment, and A Doctor in a Patient's Body, Dreaming Big with Sickle Cell Disease and Chronic Pain. These days, I like to spend my time making sure that every sickle cell survivor becomes a sickle cell thriver because it matters that we live well. Hello again, everyone. Welcome to part 2 of Eating Healthy with Sickle Cell. And today I want to talk about anti-inflammatory foods that will be helpful for sickle cell. I want to talk about it in general because, just because we have sickle cell does not mean that we aren't following the general population trend for probability of every other type of disease, right? So, our risk for high cholesterol, our risk of high blood pressure, our risk of heart disease goes right along with all the risk factors for African Americans with these diseases, which are higher likelihood than the general population. So we have to think about that. But as we take care of our general health, we have to consider what we could use to help our sickle cell disease. And if we could use something that would lift both our general well-being and also put us at a great advantage with our sickle cell, obviously that's a win-win, right? So I wanted to go over some foods like that, some foods that put us in a win-win situation when it comes to taking care of our general health and our sickle cell disease, or sickle cell disorder, as I prefer to call it. Now, I am not going to list all of the things that each thing can do, like every food. I'm not going to list everything that it can do because some things may not even pertain to us, but I want to especially focus on the things that are helpful to us both as our general health, but in leaning towards management of our sickle cell disorder as well, okay? All right, so the first one on the list is broccoli. I know no one likes to eat their broccoli. Actually, I've met some kids that love eating broccoli. I was so surprised. But broccoli is great because it has something called phytonutrients. And phytonutrients is also called phytochemicals in plants, but it's a protective thing in plants. Like, for example, if an insect bites a plant, those phytochemicals can actually kill certain insects, right? So it's a protective mechanism that the plants have developed. But it also protects the cells of the plant. And so when we eat it, it protects our cells as well. There's like crazy antioxidant potential in these phytonutrients that are in broccoli, and it allows for healing of the cells throughout our body. And so it prevents damage throughout the whole body, and it's used in prevention of heart disease and stroke. And for us in the sickle cell population, that's a huge deal that it prevents stroke because we are already at a higher risk for stroke. And so we don't want to eat something that will that will help it along. We want to eat something that won't do anything to help our risk. We want to eat things that can lower our risk, right? So eating different phytonutrients like the one in broccoli, eating your broccoli will help with all of these things. Okay. And the second one, and I have my list here so that I can make sure that I cover everything I want to tell you guys, because sometimes I get so excited and then I forget to mention everything that I want to say. So the second one is olive oil. So olive oil is a natural anti-inflammatory, and it has the right types of oils and like fats that our body needs. So when they looked at the people in the Mediterranean, which is where olives, grow naturally, they noted that these people have a lower risk of heart disease and stroke, and it was because of the olive oil that they were consuming. Olive oil helps so many things. I mean, your hair, your nails, all kinds of stuff. But for the purposes of today, the thing that I want you to focus on is that it helps our brain, all of the membranes. When I talk about any oils today, because I'm going to talk about some other categories that have oils in them. When I talk about oils, I'm talking about the good fats, because our body needs fat. Contrary to what our culture has, made us think, like, oh, you need to cut out the fat, low fat, this. Our body actually needs fat, but it needs the right types of fat. And olive oil has that. And in our brain, every cell actually has a cell membrane. In those membranes, it is lined with fat, cholesterol, and it is needed for things to work quicker. In your brain, the fats actually wrap themselves around the nerves to protect the nerves, but also, guess what? It speeds up the communication between the brain and any other part of the body. The messages in those nerves between the brain and any part of the body get sped up because it's wrapped in that fat. In medical terms, that layer is referred to as a myelin sheath, but that's fat. And so those are good fats, and olive oil has that. So it's very protective. It's also protective for, heart disease and stroke, which again, we talked about, we need protection for. And the one thing I want to say with olive oil is that, unfortunately, not every olive oil, everything that's marked olive oil is olive oil. So we just have to be careful that we're buying true olive oil, because as it's become trade and high commerce for a specific area of the world, they have mixed it with other oils that may have inflammatory factors, and so we just have to be careful. Number 3 is blueberries, and you guys, I used to not like blueberries at all, but I have since learned that I need to fall in love with blueberries because it carries a 1-2 punch. It has major antioxidant potential, and it's a major anti-inflammatory. It helps protect our DNA. It helps protect the good cholesterol in our bodies, and it actually improves your memory as well. And it maintains brain function, all because of that anti-inflammatory and antioxidant potential that it has. And lowers blood pressure as well, which we need both as an African American population that has a high incidence of high blood pressure as a whole. We need to have our blood pressures controlled when we are already at high risk of stroke, and also because it helps in terms of circulation. So blueberries will do all of that for you. Omega fats. So omega 3, 6, and 9 are the fats that we usually talk about. Since then, a lot of other omegas have, become a topic of discussion. But for the purposes of this video, I am going to focus on omega 3, 6, and 9. So let's start with omega 3. because that's the one that makes up like your cell membranes and protects you from heart disease, and it increases your good cholesterol again. Your omega 9 also increases your good cholesterol. It lowers your bad cholesterol. And so that's a difference, right? So that's good too. Omega 6 can be a double edged sword in the sense that there are things that it can do, all of those things that omega 3 and 9 can do. It can do a little of both, but it can also cause inflammation if you take it at higher levels than normal. And what I mean by that is it should actually exist in like a 3-to-1 ratio. So let's say you take 600 milligrams of omega 3 or omega 9, it should have only 200 milligrams of the omega 6. So that 3-to-1 ish ratio, it doesn't have to be exact, but it should definitely be multiples more of omega 3 and omega 9 versus omega 6, because it can cause inflammation. And unfortunately, the corn oils and the other vegetable oils have a lot of omega 6. And in the American diet, especially, we use a lot of those oils in restaurants and fast food. And so we utilize that omega 6 oil a lot more than we need to, and it puts us at high risk for heart disease and all sorts of stuff. So and because we have an inflammatory disease, we especially need to pay attention to that, right? So the other thing it can do is it can increase your incidence of clotting. Not good. Not good for sickle cell. I mean, we already have, our cells being sticky and coming together and causing blockage. The last thing we need is something that increases the risk of clotting in our circulation, right? So, yes, you need omega 3 and 9, especially. And omega 6 does have some of those properties. Just make sure that it's in the proper ratios. And if something has predominantly more omega 6, like the corn oils and the vegetable oils, you probably want to just stay away from them, period. Number 5 is nuts. So, nuts have something called L-arginine, and L-arginine is great for a lot of things. For example, it helps in wound healing. For us, we can have ulcer, foot ulcers, and they can be very complicated to treat. And so having your diet be rich in L-arginine is important. It also does something that's really good for sickle cell in that it dilates the blood vessels, and that can cause a lot of things to be good. One is that it will lower your blood pressure. I mean, you can imagine if you have a skinny hose, right? The liquid will be higher, in if you had a skinny cylinder, let's say, and you poured some water in it, the level would be higher than if you had a fatter cylinder, it would be lower, right? Basic. But that's what it's doing in terms of our blood pressures in our body. And so that's helpful as well. And it also protects the immune system. So we also need that. We tend to be immune compromised, right? So 1,200 milligrams a day of L-arginine, and we have all those things on board, all those protective things on board. The other thing nuts have is magnesium, and magnesium is great for many reasons. Magnesium controls so many things in your body, your heart, everything. But it is good for muscle relaxation as well. And it is good. It treats depression, which can be very much underdiagnosed in our population. And so I often recommend magnesium before going to bed at night, like just before sleeping, because it is very helpful at relaxing the person. It's also very good for constipation because it relaxes those muscles and allow for, your bowel to pass through. And a lot of us, take pain medications that have a constipating effect. And so it's helpful to be able to have something as natural as magnesium be able to address that situation, right? What else? I mentioned that it helps. I think I mentioned that it helps lower blood pressure, but those are some of the things that, when it comes to sickle cell, that makes magnesium good in our population. Number 6 is cherries, and specifically the tart cherries, because they have something called anthocyanins in them. And anthocyanins are like a pigment that makes, fruits and vegetables and things look kind of bluish red. And it is, but those types of food are high in antioxidants. So the cherries, for example, are high and I hope you're catching this, but most things that are antioxidants are anti-inflammatory, right? So it has high antioxidant potential, which means it's a great anti-inflammatory. And it's also, which is nice because of how our immune system is, it has an antiviral property to it. So, not a whole lot of foods have that. I mean, we know about olive and we know about oregano, having, antiviral, antifungal properties. And cherries turn out to be one of them, as because of the anthocyanins, it has antiviral properties as well. And number 7 is kelp. So kelp is something that, you might not know much about, but it's a seaweed. It's usually a brown seaweed that has fucoidin and chlorophyll. Now, fucoidin is a substance in kelp that helps slow clotting, which is great for us, right? And it also protects the brain, and once again, it's an antiviral. So here we see another food being an antiviral, and that makes it pretty powerful. The other thing that kelp has is chlorophyll, and I'm sure you've heard of people drinking chlorophyll. Chlorophyll actually causes the blood, it's like a blood tonic. It actually builds red blood cells. And chlorophyll is very similar to hemoglobin. The structure is very similar to hemoglobin. With hemoglobin, the central molecule is iron, and in chlorophyll, it's magnesium. Otherwise, they're pretty much the same. So people use chlorophyll for building their blood. Chlorophyll has many other features like wound healing and things like that, but that's a primary thing that we want to focus on chlorophyll for when it comes to sickle cell management. Number 8 is fermented foods, and the reason for that, so like, I'm sure you've heard of eating sauerkraut, and there's another name that's escaping me right now, but even your yogurts and things like that, there's a reason why it's beneficial, and that's because it has probiotics in it. And so the probiotics are very helpful in your digestive system, both because they have a function whether it's your clotting, your vitamin K production, or your immune system. I mean, your probiotic, your immune system makes up about 70% of your gut, or 70% of your immune system is in your gut. So you have to take care of your gut. And so having probiotics to be able to work on your digestive system, digest your food properly, make the things that it needs to make for your body, is very important. And oftentimes, because we get antibiotics, that can actually kill our probiotics. And so we need to keep taking them to make sure that we have adequate amounts in our body. That's all for today, and I will see you next time in part 3 of Eating Well for Sickle Cell. Have a great day. Until next time, this is Dr. Simone Says, and remember, you are a sickle cell thriver and not just a survivor. If you benefited from this episode any at all, please like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and share the video with one other person as your good deed towards the sickle cell cause. Have a great day. If you'd like to contact me to speak in your area, please don't hesitate to email me at drSimoneSays@gmail.com. If you are the one referring me, please let me know so that I could send you a nice thank you surprise.